The world we live in today was not built by politicians or generals. It was dreamed into existence by a man who saw lightning as his playmate. Imagine a night in 1856, so violent that the sky seemed to be tearing itself apart in the small village of Smiljan. The thunder was not just a sound, it was a roar that shook the very foundations of the earth. In the middle of this celestial war, Nikola Tesla was born. The midwife, terrified by the electric chaos outside, whispered that this child was a bad omen, a child of darkness, destined for a life of storm and tragedy. But his mother, Juka, a woman who could weave intricate tools with her bare hands, looked into the eyes of her newborn and corrected the world. She said, "No, he will be a child of light." This was not just a mother's love. It was a prophecy. From his earliest days, Tesla's mind functioned differently than any other human being. He did not just observe reality, he felt the vibrations of the universe. While other children were playing with toys, Nikola was mesmerized by the static electricity on the back of his cat, Makak. When he stroked the cat's fur and saw the sparks fly, he didn't just see a trick of physics. He saw the mysterious force that fueled the stars. He asked his father, "What is this?" His father said, "It is nothing but electricity." From that moment, Tesla's life had a singular purpose: to capture that electricity and give it to humanity. But the gift of genius came with a heavy burden. Tesla was haunted by vivid hallucinations and flashes of light that blurred the line between the physical world and his imagination. He would see entire machines moving in the air before him with such clarity that he could reach out and try to touch them. This was not madness, it was a superpower. He developed the ability to build and test entire inventions in his mind without ever touching a pencil or a piece of metal. He could run a mental engine for weeks and then inspect it to see which part had worn down. This internal laboratory allowed him to solve problems that the greatest scientists of his time couldn't even comprehend. However, his journey was almost cut short before it began. As a young man, Tesla fell deathly ill with cholera. For 9 months, he lay in bed, paralyzed by pain and drifting in and out of consciousness. His father, a stern priest who wanted Nikola to follow in his footsteps, sat by his bed in despair. In a moment of clarity, Tesla looked at his father and said, "I may get well if you let me study engineering." His father, desperate to save his son, promised that he would send him to the best technical school in the world. As if by magic, the moment the promise was made, Tesla's will to live returned. He didn't just recover, he emerged with a fire in his soul that would eventually burn bright enough to be seen from space. He went to the Polytechnic Institute in Graz, where he became an obsession. He worked from 3 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day. He mastered languages, mathematics, and physics. But he was searching for something deeper. He was searching for the secret of alternating current. At the time, the world was told that AC was impossible, that it would never work. His professors mocked him, calling his ideas a perpetual motion scheme. They told him he was wasting his brilliant mind on a fantasy. But Tesla knew they were wrong. He knew that the heartbeat of the universe was not a steady stream of DC, but a rhythmic alternating pulse. After years of struggle and a nervous breakdown that made his senses so sharp, he could hear a fly landing in the next room. He finally found his answer. He was walking in a park in Budapest, reciting poetry by Goethe, when the vision hit him like a bolt from the blue. He stopped in his tracks and drew a diagram in the sand with a stick. It was the induction motor. The world didn't know it yet, but in that dusty park, a janitor of ideas had just solved the greatest puzzle in human history. He was ready. He packed his meager belongings and set his sights on the only place big enough for his dreams, New York City. He arrived at the docks with 4 cents, a few poems, and a letter that would change the course of human civilization. He was a stranger in a strange land, but he carried the lightning in his pocket. When Nikola Tesla stepped off the ship in New York City in 1884, he didn't look like a man who would redefine the world. He was thin, pale, and spoke a language the rough streets of Manhattan didn't understand. He had been robbed of his luggage and his money during the voyage, leaving him with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mind that was worth more than all the gold in the Federal Reserve. He walked through the chaotic city where horses pulled carriages through mud. and the air was thick with the smoke of the Industrial Revolution. He was looking for one man, the Wizard of Menlo Park, Thomas Alva Edison. Tesla believed that meeting Edison would be like meeting a god. He expected a fellow visionary who shared his passion for progress, but instead he found a cold-blooded businessman who cared more about profit margins than the mysteries of the universe. Edison was at the height of his power. He had built an empire on direct current, or DC. It was a flawed system that could only transmit electricity over short distances, requiring massive power plants on every street corner and a jungle of dangerous wires that often caught fire. But Edison owned the patents, and he wasn't about to let anyone threaten his monopoly. When Tesla presented his letter of recommendation, Edison looked at the young immigrant with suspicion. He didn't care about Tesla's theories of alternating current, which he dismissed as dangerous nonsense. However, he recognized Tesla's raw engineering talent. Edison had a problem. His DC dynamos were constantly breaking down, costing him thousands of dollars. He looked at the hungry young man and made a deal that would become the greatest lie in the history of science. He told Tesla, "If you can improve the efficiency of these machines and solve my technical problems, I will give you $50,000. For a man with 4 cents in his pocket, $50,000 was a king's ransom. It was enough for Tesla to build his own laboratory and prove the world wrong. Tesla went to work with a ferocity that terrified the other employees. For nearly a year, he became a ghost in Edison's workshops. He barely ate, and he never slept more than 2 hours a night. He redesigned 24 different types of machines, adding controls and features that Edison's best scientists couldn't even imagine. He wasn't just fixing parts, he was perfecting the very soul of the electrical system. He worked through the heat of the day and the silence of the night, driven by the promise of the man he admired. Finally, the job was done. Tesla had saved Edison's company millions of dollars and had fulfilled his end of the bargain to the letter. He walked into Edison's office, his eyes red from exhaustion, but his heart full of hope. He asked for the $50,000 he had earned through blood and sweat. Edison leaned back in his chair, put his feet on the desk, and laughed in Tesla's face. He looked at the man who had just saved his empire and said, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." Instead of the fortune he was promised, Edison offered him a $10 a week raise. In that moment, the world of Nikola Tesla shattered. He realized that the man he had looked up to was nothing more than a thief of ideas. Tesla didn't argue. He didn't beg. He stood up straight, adjusted his worn coat, and walked out of the office and out of Edison's life forever. He chose his dignity over a paycheck, and he chose the truth over a lie. But the world is a cruel place for a man with no money and a vision that no one believes in. The winter of 1885 was one of the coldest on record, and Tesla found himself at the bottom of the social ladder. The man who could visualize the rotation of the planets was forced to pick up a shovel. He spent months digging ditches for the very same Edison Electric Company he had just saved. He worked in the mud and the snow alongside men who couldn't read or write their own names. Every shovelful of dirt was a reminder of his failure, and every blister on his hands was a testament to the betrayal he had suffered. He felt the sting of being an outsider more than ever before. He was the janitor of the streets, his brilliant mind trapped in a body that was breaking under the weight of manual labor. Yet even in the darkness of the trenches, Tesla did not stop dreaming. While his hands were digging, his mind was building. He spoke to the other workers about a world where energy was free, where machines ran without wires, and where the power of the sun and the water could be harnessed to end human toil. They laughed at him and called him the crazy Serbian, but Tesla didn't care. He knew that the dirt on his clothes was temporary, but the ideas in his head were eternal. He was waiting for a spark, a single moment, where fate would intervene and give him the chance to strike back. That spark finally came when a foreman noticed that the ditch digger was sketching complex mathematical formulas in the dirt during his lunch break. He realized that this was no ordinary laborer. He introduced Tesla to a group of investors who were looking to challenge Edison's dominance. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about the future of the human race. The war of currents was about to begin, and Tesla was ready to unleash the lightning. After months of digging ditches and surviving on the scraps of a world that refused to see his genius, fate finally opened a door that Edison had tried to lock forever. A group of investors recognized that the man with the shovel was actually a man with a godlike intellect. They provided the capital for Tesla to open his own laboratory just a few blocks away from Edison's headquarters. It was there, in the quiet hum of his workshop, that Tesla finally brought his induction motor to life. It was a masterpiece of engineering that required no brushes and produced no sparks. It was silent, powerful, and perfect. But Tesla knew that an invention is nothing without a champion. He needed someone with the courage and the wealth to take on the Edison empire. Enter George Westinghouse, a rugged inventor and businessman who had made his fortune in the railroad industry. Westinghouse visited Tesla's lab, and within minutes, he knew he was looking at the future. He didn't just see a motor, he saw the end of the gas lamp era. He offered Tesla the most lucrative contract in the history of invention, $1 million for his patents, plus a royalty of $2.50 for every horsepower of electricity sold. Suddenly, the man who had been digging ditches was the wealthiest engineer in the world. But this wealth was not for luxury, it was for war. The war of currents was no longer a disagreement between scientists. It was a battle for the soul of the industrial age. Edison, realizing his DC monopoly was crumbling, launched a smear campaign that would make modern politics look like child's play. He wanted to convince the public that Tesla's alternating current was a silent killer lurking in their walls. Edison began a series of gruesome public demonstrations. He paid neighborhood children to bring him stray cats and dogs, which he then electrocuted using Tesla's AC system in front of horrified crowds. He even helped secretively develop the first electric chair for the state of New York, insisting that it be powered by alternating current, so that the word Westinghouse would become synonymous with death by electricity. He wanted every household in America to be terrified of flipping a switch. But Tesla remained calm in the face of this madness. He knew that the truth didn't need to scream to be heard. He knew that science would eventually win over fear. He waited for the perfect stage to prove it. And that stage was the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. This was the White City, a grand collection of buildings designed to show the pinnacle of human achievement. The organizers needed a way to light the fair, and Edison's bid was over $1 million. Westinghouse and Tesla bid half that amount. When they won the contract, Edison was so furious that he refused to allow them to use his patented light bulbs. Most men would have surrendered, but Tesla simply invented a new type of light bulb that didn't infringe on Edison's patents. On the opening night of the fair, a crowd of thousands gathered in total darkness. President Grover Cleveland pushed a button, and in a split second, nearly 100,000 incandescent lamps burst into life. It was a sea of light so bright it could be seen for miles. The crowd gasped in collective wonder. In that single moment, the fear Edison had spent years building vanished. The world saw that Tesla's light was not a killer. It was a miracle. But Tesla's greatest dream was still to come. Since he was a child, looking at a picture of a waterfall in a book, he had dreamed of harnessing the power of Niagara Falls. He wanted to turn the roar of the water into the hum of the city. While others saw the falls as a beautiful landmark, Tesla saw it as a giant battery waiting to be tapped. In 1896, he and Westinghouse completed the first large-scale hydroelectric power plant at Niagara. When the switch was flipped, the power traveled 26 miles to the city of Buffalo. This was a feat that Edison's DC system could never achieve. It was the birth of the modern power grid. Tesla had successfully captured the energy of nature and delivered it to the homes of ordinary people. At the height of this victory, Westinghouse faced a financial crisis. His investors were demanding that he get out of the expensive royalty contract with Tesla, or the company would go bankrupt. Westinghouse went to Tesla and explained the situation. He told him that his dream of world electrification was at stake. Without hesitation, Tesla did something that no businessman in history would ever do. He took the contract that was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps billions in today's money, and he tore it into pieces. He told Westinghouse, "Your friendship means more to me than any amount of gold. Keep your company and keep our dream alive." Tesla walked away from a fortune that would have made him the richest man on the planet because he cared more about the future than his own bank account. He had won the war, but he had sacrificed his empire to ensure that the light would never go out. He was now free to pursue his most ambitious and dangerous idea, yet the wireless transmission of power across the entire globe. With the war of currents won, and the world finally bathed in the glow of his alternating current Tesla, did not stop to celebrate. For him, the wires that spanned across cities were nothing more than a temporary solution, a primitive web that limited the true potential of energy. He began to obsess over a vision that sounded like sorcery to his contemporaries: the wireless transmission of power. He believed that the Earth itself was a giant conductor and that the atmosphere was filled with untapped electricity. He wanted to turn the entire planet into a single light bulb. In 1899, he left the noise of New York and moved to the high, silent plains of Colorado Springs. He built a laboratory that looked like something out of a nightmare, a wooden fortress topped with a towering copper mast that reached toward the heavens. Inside this laboratory, Tesla became a god of thunder. He built the largest Tesla coil ever created, a massive transformer that could generate millions of volts. When he flipped the switch, the roar of the machine could be heard for 15 miles. Lightning bolts over 100 feet long danced through the air, snapping and popping like the crack of a giant's whip. The ground beneath his feet vibrated with so much energy that sparks flew from the grass as people walked by, and butterflies were seen glowing with blue halos. Tesla sat in the middle of this electric storm, reading a book as calm as a monk. He discovered that he could light up lamps buried in the ground over 100 feet away without any wires. He had proven that the Earth could carry energy. He was no longer just an inventor. He was a man playing with the fundamental forces of creation. But Colorado Springs was only the beginning. Tesla returned to New York with a plan so ambitious that it required the backing of the world's most powerful banker, J.P. Morgan. He proposed the construction of the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island. To Morgan, Tesla described it as a world wireless system for transmitting news and images across the ocean, essentially predicting the internet and smartphones a century before they existed. But in his heart, Tesla had a much grander secret. He didn't just want to send information, he wanted to send power. He envisioned a world where anyone, anywhere, could stick a rod into the ground and pull out free electricity to heat their homes and run their machines. No coal, no oil, no bills. He wanted to give the gift of fire to every human being on Earth for free. Construction began on the massive 187-foot tower. It was a magnificent structure of wood and steel, anchored by iron pipes, driven hundreds of feet into the earth to grip the world. But as the tower rose, so did the suspicions of his financier. J.P. Morgan was a man of cold, hard logic and profit. He asked Tesla a question that would change the fate of humanity. If anyone can pull energy from the air, where do I put the meter? Tesla spoke of progress and the evolution of the human race. Morgan spoke of dividends and control. When Morgan realized that Tesla's dream of free energy would destroy the monopolies of oil and electricity he had worked so hard to build, He did the one thing that can kill a genius. He cut off the funding. The silence that followed was deafening. Work at Wardenclyffe stopped. The workers left, and the machines grew cold. Tesla begged and pleaded with Morgan for more support, explaining that the system was nearly complete. But the doors of the financial world were slammed shut in his face. To make matters worse, his old rival Marconi successfully sent a wireless radio signal across the Atlantic using many of Tesla's own patents. The world cheered for Marconi, while Tesla stood in the shadow of his unfinished tower. He was accused of being a dreamer who had lost his touch. The man who had given the world the 20th century was now being treated like a ghost. Tesla's mental health began to fracture under the weight of this ultimate betrayal. He watched as his magnificent tower was eventually sold for scrap metal to pay off his debts. They used dynamite to bring it down, and it is said that Tesla wept as he heard the explosion from his hotel room. He had spent his life trying to lift humanity out of the darkness and into a new era of abundance, only to be pulled back down by the very greed he sought to eliminate. He was a king without a throne, a scientist without a lab, and a visionary whose greatest vision had been turned into a pile of rubble. But even as he walked the streets of New York alone and penniless, the lightning still burned in his eyes. He knew that one day a future generation would find his notes and realize that the man they called crazy was the only one who was truly awake. The final act of Nikola Tesla's life did not take place under the grand spotlights of a laboratory or the gold-trimmed halls of a palace. Instead, it unfolded in the quiet, dusty shadows of room 3327 at the New Yorker Hotel. The man who had once stood before the world's elite, showing them the future, was now a ghost, walking the streets of Manhattan. He had no more towers to build, and no more empires to save. His only companions were the pigeons of the city. He would spend hours every day in the park, feeding them and caring for the injured ones. People who passed him saw an old man in a threadbare coat, but they didn't realize they were walking past a titan who had captured the lightning and tamed the rivers. Tesla's mind, even in his 80s, never slowed down. He lived in a world of pure mathematics and theoretical physics that exceeded anything the scientific community could understand. He began to talk about weapons of such terrifying power that they could end all war forever. He spoke of a teleforce, or what the newspapers called a death ray, a beam of concentrated energy that could bring down 10,000 airplanes from hundreds of miles away. He didn't want to build a weapon for killing. He wanted to build an invisible wall of peace. He believed that if every nation had this power, no one would ever dare to attack another. But the world was already plunging into the darkness of World War II, and the leaders of the time were too blinded by hate to listen to a man who spoke of a world without borders. As the years passed, Tesla became more eccentric. He developed an obsession with the numbers 3, 6, and 9, saying that if you only knew the magnificence of these numbers, you would have the key to the universe. He would walk around a block 3 times before entering a building, and he demanded 18 clean towels every morning. To some, this was the sign of a mind breaking under the weight of isolation. To others, it was a man who had seen so far into the fabric of reality that he was simply operating on a frequency no one else could hear. He lived on a diet of warm milk and crackers, his body becoming as frail as a bird's wing, but his spirit remained focused on the stars. On the night of January 7th, 1943, the world lost its greatest light. Nikola Tesla passed away in his sleep at the age of 86. He died alone, just as he had lived most of his life. There was no family by his side, and no children to carry his name, but his death triggered a panic in the highest levels of the government. Within hours, agents from the Office of Alien Property and the FBI arrived at the hotel. They seized every notebook, every scrap of paper, and every trunk of files he had left behind. They were terrified that his secret inventions, the death ray, the wireless power systems, the flying machines, would fall into the wrong hands. The man who was ignored while he was alive was suddenly the most dangerous man on Earth the moment he died. The FBI eventually released some of his papers, but many believe that his most revolutionary secrets are still locked away in classified vaults. They stole his work, but they could never steal his legacy. Tesla's name was nearly erased from the history books for decades, replaced by the names of men who were better at marketing and business. But truth is like electricity. It always finds a way to flow. Today, the name Tesla is synonymous with the future. Every time you charge a phone, every time you use a remote control, and every time you look at the neon lights of a city, you are looking at the dreams of Nikola Tesla. His life was a tragedy of brilliance, betrayed by greed, but his story is the ultimate anthem for every underdog and every visionary. He proved that you don't need a PhD or a massive bank account to change the world. You only need the courage to see what others cannot. He died in a hotel room with nothing in his pockets, but he left the entire planet enriched by his genius. The present may belong to the businessmen and the politicians, but the future, the world of light and infinite possibility, that world belongs to Nikola Tesla. He was the child of light who taught us how to talk to the universe, and now his light belongs to you. Keep your mind open, keep your dreams bold, and remember that the greatest inventions are not made of steel. They are made of the fire inside your soul.